what are your predictions on that?
Well, I think one of the things is that, the new government is probably going to concentrate on domestic issues. That's been, in fact, the major point of understanding from all the parties, right, center, left, Arab. I mean, it's a very unique consortium, which has never happened in Israeli history. I'm actually encouraged by that. I mean, if it works, then I think it could really produce an effective governance involving, as I say, all spectrums of Israeli society, Jewish, Arab, right, left, center, secular, religious, and the like. But I think the concentration will be on domestic issues, because on that there is a consensus. In other words, the issues of tackling the post-pandemic corona, etc., number one, and the health system as a whole. Number two, the economy. There hasn't been a budget for close to 3 years, so that's a major issue. I think the whole question of domestic security, law enforcement in the north and in the south, it's been at this point, I think, somewhat out of control. And I think so. Law enforcement is very important in terms of in the Arab sector, because I think they've been asking for that. It will mean, collecting the illegal weapons that have been stored there, etc. So providing more protection in various sectors, and I think to tackle as best as possible the various divides that have arisen in Israeli society domestically. I think as to foreign policy, my hope is that we might see a return to a bipartisan foreign policy. I think one of the problems that we've had during the Trump period is the identification that developed between Netanyahu and Trump, between Israel and the Republican Party. I think that was unhealthy, and I think we need to return to a bipartisan foreign policy. And that will be more, I think, in line with a Canadian approach as well as an American approach.
Well, Canada just issued the statement. Mark Garneau talked about, we're not into apartheid. Somebody was saying that Jessica Atwin, I'm sure you heard, she crossed the floor from the Green Party to the Liberals, and she was tweeting about that, it's an apartheid state, stop supporting it. So let's talk a bit specifically about what should Canada be looking for in this new government, because, Canada has a two-state policy, although it definitely does have unconditional support for Israel's right to exist. So,
well, I think President Biden put it very well when he said, apart from his, I think, most comprehensive statement of any political leader in condemnation of the anti-Semitism, when he referred to it as being despicable, unconscionable, un-American, etc., etc. It was a very long statement, but I mean, that was the essence of it. Trudeau also, had condemned it and said, anti-Semitism has no place in Canada or elsewhere. But I think the Biden statement otherwise, which has not gotten as much notice, that peace will come when there is a recognition of the legitimacy of Israel as a Jewish state in the Middle East. In other words, for him, that was the root cause of the conflict. And I think that's an important point, because I've often been a long-time supporter of not just two states. I felt that two states was sort of a lazy characterization. Two states for two peoples, presupposing, therefore, the mutual acknowledgement and recognition of each other's legitimacy. So this means, therefore, that the recognition of the legitimacy of Israel as a Jewish state in the Middle East, we go back to what Biden said, is at the core. Now, because of what has been for many years now, a kind of, on the one hand, a culture of rejectionism by Palestinian leadership, and an Israeli almost reactive move to other priorities rather than the Israeli-Palestinian issue. I think if we're going to return to the Israeli-Palestinian issue, and we should, it should be on the basis of two states for two peoples along the lines that I was suggesting.
Now, Canada may worry about the nationalist tendencies of Bennett and settlements, which would be a flashpoint, right?
If Bennett were acting alone, that would be one thing. But he is part of a coalition and a coalition set of agreements. And so he's not able to act unilaterally any more than people on the left in that coalition can act unilaterally. So as I say, because there's an agreement on the domestic agenda, health, economy, security, etc., I think that foreign policy will take a second place. At the same time, anybody who knows Israel, the Middle East, knows that you never know what can happen. You can be proceeding and all of a sudden you have a Israel-Hamas war again. But my sense is that there will not be acts undertaken unilaterally, and so there will there'll probably be a restraint with respect to settlement building for the next while at least.
If the government lasts.
If the government lasts, right. And that, look, it's a government that's going to be sworn in. If it is sworn in tomorrow with a 61-59, if just one person somehow changes his mind between our discussion now and tomorrow, everything can just go asunder. I think they've all signed. I think they've all committed. My sense is it'll go ahead, but it'll always have that sense of vulnerability because of that. The good news, though, is that the interpersonal relations amongst the party leaders are good. That's a very important component. In other words, the real problem with regard to Netanyahu's leadership was not so much his policies, but the fact that he alienated a whole cluster of people that, had they not been alienated, there would have been a large national unity government. I mean, Bennett, Ayelet Shaked, Lieberman, Gantz, all these, Saar, they all worked with Netanyahu. Just think, if the personal had worked, there would have been a large national unity government. I think the relations between those same people now on an interpersonal level are very good. In other words, Lapid and Bennett may come from different approaches, but they have a very good personal relationship. And the same with Gideon Saar and with Gantz. So I think it may work because the interpersonal, so far as I can appreciate it at this point, is working.
Can you smell the fires where you are, by the way?
No, I did 2 days ago, but not today.
Okay, and there was
It's
also
interesting that you ask about it, because we were in Ra'anana for Shabbat and came back afterwards, and my daughter Michal was writing about it actually, and she said too few people knew about it.
There's 500 fires. What do you mean too few people know?
No, she meant in Chutz La'aretz, people didn't know about it.
Do we know whether it was terror or is it arson from local people, or what do we know?
The suspicion is that it is arson and terror, both, but it's happened before. This is not the first time. And so the felt apprehension is that these are arson attacks and have a terrorist character. Look, this was going on when Hamas was engaged in that eco terrorism that nobody seemed to appreciate, the targeting of agricultural fields, etc., in the south and so on. So that too was ignored and sanitized when it was happening. I'm hoping it isn't. I'd like to think that it's, negligence, but it looks too pervasive and too coordinated for this simply to be random arson.
A lot of analysts have said, this new government's going to be tested. The Hamas-Israel thing was a test. This could be a test. I'm just speculating, but, the terror incident today in Kalandia could be another test. They sent a woman across the border and they shot her, right?
these things are unfortunately, the products of ongoing incitement. And whereas, the war ended in terms of the rocketed attacks and the like, the incitement continues. And I think the incitement, particularly on the social media, which amplifies that incendiary incitement, leads to terrorist attacks taking place, whether it be car ramming or knife attacks, whatever. One doesn't read about it always in the diaspora. But I think, to me, the main issue here is that of incitement.